Good morning, everyone. I'm here with DT Cochrane, the CLC Senior Economist, and as Parliament reconvenes, we are here to remind every parliamentarian that workers' voices must be heard, that our priorities must be addressed. We are at a critical moment. Workers are facing real uncertainty, and families and communities are under strain. Jobs are less secure, our economy is slowing, and unemployment continues to rise. Young people too often are shut out of stable jobs, out of affordable housing, and out of the chance to build their futures. And at this time, this government's decisions matter more than ever. And let me be crystal clear, this is the worst possible time for cuts. Austerity is not inevitable. It is a political choice. And Prime Minister Carney is making the wrong choice. Cutting public services and good jobs will make life harder and weaken Canada in the face of significant economic disruption. We need the Prime Minister and his government to make a better choice, because we know that you cannot cut your way out of a crisis. The smarter choice is to invest in people and in the public services that everyone relies on. That has to start with truly affordable housing, with healthcare, with skills training, infrastructure, public transit, and a strong Made in Canada industrial strategy. These are the investments that create good union jobs, lower costs for families, and build long-term resilience. These are investments that put people first. Prime Minister Carney's new housing agency, Build Canada Homes, promises affordable housing. And yes, we agree, we urgently need affordable homes in this country. We need to build them quickly, and all levels of government must work together to make that happen, with communities shaping the kinds of housing that they need. But I have to ask, what is the definition of affordable housing for this government? Right now, the word has no meaning. It is used over and over again in guides and plans like Build Canada Homes, but it's never truly defined. Workers need homes that they can actually afford, with clear, region-specific definitions of affordability and serious investments in non-market housing. A nation-building project today has to mean more than steel, lumber, and concrete. It means universal public programs like pharmacare, like childcare, like healthcare. It means valuing the very workers that keep our communities functioning and thriving. And it means providing a strong social safety net that will help families get through difficult times. Nation building means things like reforming our outdated employment insurance system, so that it is actually accessible and provides adequate income supports when workers need it the most. Because right now, too many workers are excluded from the benefits that they have already paid into. We need a universal 360-hour entry requirement, we need a higher benefit rate, we need longer durations, and we need automatic adjustments so that when the economy weakens, those workers are being caught. Raising wages is also critically essential, and government interference in collective bargaining has to stop. Section 107 of Canada's Labour Code has to be eliminated, period. Trade and procurement policies must create good union jobs here at home, not funneling money into corporate profits. And for the next generation, bold initiatives like a youth guarantee ensuring that work, training, or education within a short period of time upon graduation from high school is absolutely essential. The Bank of Canada's decision shows that they recognize the real economic pressures that families are facing. Lower rates are welcome, but we know that that is not enough. Prime Minister Carney cannot keep rowing in the opposite direction with cuts to public services. Workers and families cannot bear the burden of tough economic times alone. Instead, we need better choices. The government is reaching for the same failed austerity playbook that we have seen before. Nearly 10,000 public service jobs are at risk. Departmental cuts of up to 15% are being demanded, and that impacts Canadians seeking those very services every single day. Meanwhile, defense spending is soaring, and the wealthiest are enjoying generous tax breaks. In 1995, then Liberal Finance Minister Paul Martin's austerity budget gutted healthcare. It wiped out affordable housing, and it dismantled social programs that millions of people relied on. And decades later, we are still feeling those consequences. Repeating those mistakes right now would be short-sighted, and it would be dangerous. Austerity weakens our economy. It undermines vital public services that we rely on. And, workers didn't create this crisis, but workers are very prepared to be part of the solution. The federal government has to choose real investments in people and public services, not in corporate handouts, not more tax breaks, and not more cuts. That is how we can build a fairer, stronger, and more resilient Canada. Workers are not the problem, we are the solution. And every single politician should listen carefully to what we have to say. So I will now turn it over to DT to give us an update on the fragile state of the Canadian economy.
Thanks, Bea. Good morning. The Trump administration's ongoing trade war is causing havoc for Canada's economy. But alarm bells were sounding before tariffs were threatened. In 2022, Canada's monthly unemployment rate dipped below 5% for the first time. By August 2025, it had risen above 7%. That leaves over 450,000 more people without jobs. However, even before the US presidential election in 2024, the unemployment rate had already surpassed 6%. Unemployment is rising due to job losses, as well as a lack of hiring. Almost 60% of unemployed workers are people joining or rejoining the labor force, an unprecedented high. Long-term unemployment is also climbing, with nearly 1 in 4 unemployed workers without a job for 6 months or more, the highest share since 1997. Youth unemployment is particularly alarming. The unemployment rate for young workers is nearing 15%, the highest in over 20 years. For young workers from marginalized communities, it is even worse, with roughly 25% of Arab and Black youth unemployed. As young people struggle to find jobs, they also face costly rents and groceries. This will have long-term negative consequences for them, their communities, and Canada's economy. Job losses are not limited to trade-exposed sectors like manufacturing and transportation. Significant losses are occurring in professional, scientific, and technical services, retail, and public administration. While Prime Minister Carney has announced support for targeted industries, his government has largely ignored the other massive red flags in Canada's labour market. Canada's economic malaise extends beyond unemployment. GDP fell every month in the second quarter of 2025, a pattern only seen during the 2008 Great Recession and the 2014-2015 commodity price crash. Labor productivity, measured as GDP per work hour, was lower in the second quarter of 2025 than at the end of 2019. This is due to decades of underinvestment in productive capacity. Corporate investment in machinery and equipment has flatlined since 2008 and fell nearly 10% in Q2 2025, with total investment on track to be lower than in 2006. Without adequate investment in tools and equipment, higher productivity is impossible. Rising unemployment and a slowing economy are the result of businesses and households cutting back in the face of mounting uncertainty. These cutbacks have a ripple effect as they lower business revenues, prompting further cutbacks. At this moment, austerity is the worst possible response. When the private sector is cutting jobs, the government should be hiring workers and expanding public investment, a principle recognized since the pioneering work of economist John Maynard Keynes in the 1930s. Unlike Mr. Carney, Keynes knew that you can no more cut your way out of a crisis than you can dig your way out of a hole. Keynes's ideas helped to end the Great Depression. In contrast, austerity prolonged the harms caused by the 2008 Great Recession. Prime Minister Carney is misleading Canadians with claims that the federal deficit is unsustainable and therefore cuts are needed. Canada's debt remains well within historical norms and below many of our international peers. Some blame government spending for recent high inflation. However, the actual reasons are simple. First, pandemic-induced disruptions to supply chains increased production costs. And second, corporations with pricing power took advantage of the situation to further boost profits. Corporate markups have risen from about 11% pre-pandemic to around 15%. Higher markups on higher costs meant corporations in Canada pocketed hundreds of billions of dollars in extra profits. If the government is concerned about debt, instead of cutting public services and jobs, it could reclaim these unearned corporate profits to allow for investments in essential public services, including affordable housing. This approach would expand infrastructure, create jobs, raise wages, and stimulate demand. Truly a win-win for Canadians. Thank you.
I was wondering, what is your stance on the tariff on Chinese EVs, given what what we're seeing in the prairies with the canola tariffs?
You know, our issue is that we really need to make sure that we are supporting Canadian workers first and foremost. And that means that we can't let Chinese EVs really destroy our domestic manufacturing. And so if there are going to be investments, it needs to ensure that Canadian workers are at the front of the line for those good jobs that are going to be supported by any kind of investments that government makes.
And what about, there was talk yesterday about European EVs. How do you factor that into this situation?
Yeah, just to reiterate what Bea said, we're in a difficult moment of figuring out what Canada's economy can and should look like for Canadians, for Canadian workers, for Canadian communities. And I think most people understand that we want to and need to maintain a robust manufacturing sector, including the manufacturing of transportation equipment, however that is going to look. This will mean ongoing negotiations with our favorable and unfavorable trade partners to make sure that our economy is robust and sustainable and works for all Canadians.
And I just have two questions on sort of the green jobs transition. I know you've talked a lot about this, and there's other stuff happening right now, but I'm just wondering what you make of the federal government delaying and reviewing the EV sales mandate.
You know, we actually, outside of EVs, we actually need an industrial strategy so that workers know that we're going to have jobs at the end of it. And that has to be more than automotive kind of supports. So what we're hearing is that government is coming up with what the strategy will look like, but we haven't actually seen where those jobs are going to be created and where those jobs are going to be safeguarded. Where are those investments going to be made? What sectors of the economy can we rely on? What geographical locations of the economy can we rely on? What is the actual cohesive plan that this government is putting forward on economic stimulus? So that's what we want to hear from this government. That's what we want them to unpack, and not just on automotive, but on every sector of our economy, because that's what workers are demanding and want to know right now.
And earlier this summer, Scott Moe indicated that the province of Saskatchewan will likely be extending coal-fired generation past the federal deadline. I'm wondering just what you're hearing from unions that represent workers in those industries.
Workers in every industry, including in the coal industry, are very worried about their jobs. We talk to our mine worker unions very regularly, and they are worried about what the pathway looks like for them. Is it carbon capture and storage? Is it transitioning entirely? What, again, is the plan that governments, every level of government, has to actually secure these jobs in places like Estevan, Saskatchewan? When you take that coal power plant out of commission, what happens to that community? We actually need a strategy to address that, and that has to be every level of government working together to come up with those solutions, along with those workers being at the table to make those decisions.
And just on pre-budget talks, you've laid out some of your concerns, some of your asks. What other political parties have you been in touch with? Because the Liberals are trying to shore up support for their budget. Have you been able to have any productive conversations with the Conservative caucus? Tell me a bit about that.
So we have not yet spoken with the Conservative caucus. I do have a meeting tomorrow with a Conservative MP, so we'll be talking about these issues. We have been speaking with our, the Liberal MPs on these issues. We've been speaking to the NDP MPs on these issues. We will speak to whoever we need to speak to in order to move our points forward and to engage in meaningful conversations about what workers need right now.
Thank you. This concludes the press conference. Merci. Ça conclut cette conférence de presse.